Greetings, everyone. Welcome to your Astro-Weather Check for Thursday's Sagittarius full moon, but also for the incredibly dynamic week we've had astrologically, which will continue into this week. So I want to get into everything that's kind of been happening, all the planets that have been shifting and moving and meeting up, especially. And then we'll look at the chart for the new moon. I'm going to use some of my Oracle decks as a resource in this discussion today because I feel like it's important just to have some clarity around meanings and that kind of thing. And we'll pull a Oracle card from the Sacred Rebels deck at the end of today's Astro Weather Check, as we've had a lot of Uranian energy kind of infused into everything. And as you know, that is definitely the planet that is related to liberation and rebellion, and especially sacred rebellion. And I use this deck a lot with Uranian energy. So just for our time date stamp right now, it is around 8:20 a.m. on Sunday, May 19th, here in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And yesterday was a really big day. This whole week has been really big ever since really the new moon astro weather check that I did back on May 3rd for our Taurus new moon, which was on May 7th. It's been really big energy, and there's been a lot that has happened and kind of manifested in the physical realm, which is kind of what I'm going to give this Sagittarius full moon tagline. I think it's brewing as some kind of manifestation into the physical or inspired manifestation or something like that. I'm still kind of working with it. So once I actually write up the description for the Astro Weather Check, you'll see what the tagline actually ends up being. But it's circling around something like that. And there's a lot of reasons for that, which we'll get into. So just to recap, we had our beautiful, incredibly energetic, awesome Taurus new moon back on May 7th. And the tagline I gave that one was Goddess Rising for a number of reasons. And I'll put a link for that in the episode notes so you can go back and review that astro weather check, because now with this full moon, at least on the short term monthly lunar cycle, we have some kind of manifestation, something coming to the surface, something coming to fruition from that 2 weeks ago, roughly. So think back to then, reflect back. This is a really good time still for reflection, for review, for integration of all of March and April with the eclipse season, everything, the Mercury retrograde, which is now officially clear and done, which I'll also get into. Really good time just to see what has materialized, manifested, come to the surface, especially on your healing journey, particularly in relationships, and how to move forward from anything that may have been sudden or out of the blue from March, April, but also from this past week. I'll get into that a little bit too. There's just been a lot of things that have sort of left me like baffled is the word that I keep using, like jaw drop energy just around other people's behaviors and actions right now. There's a lot of things that are very low vibration and people kind of coming to the surface, and there's a reason for that. But it's, our choice to work with it, move through it, heal it, or move forward in a different space and kind of stay, in that lower vibration energy of that whatever's coming to the surface in your own life related to all of the cosmic energy and planetary shifts that we're going through. So it's always a choice. Remember, there's always free will, but the best way to work with all of this is to choose the healed path, the higher vibration energy, the action oriented approach that's going to work on our own healing journey and healing ourselves and kind of confronting our own shadows, our own subconscious things that might be coming to the surface for healing, for review, for breaking of patterns, familial patterns, subconscious patterns, just looking back on your life and just thinking of anything that's kind of repeating like a cycle that you might be kind of not stuck in, but there's an opportunity here to really move forward in a different way. And just remembering that every time we do that individually, that contributes to the whole, that contributes to the energy of the planet, the vibration of the planet, to all of us, to all of humanity, to kind of rise up into a different and new consciousness. And our consciousness is one thing that is a huge focus, I guess you could say, with a lot of the energy that has happened already in March and April, but moving forward through the month of May and beyond into the rest of this year. Consciousness is a huge keyword, buzzword thing that I kind of want everyone listening to this to keep in mind as I'm discussing everything that is happening kind of cosmically. So, new moon, May 7th. You can link back to that episode to get a good idea for what I was talking about for that, which was an incredibly awesome new moon. One of the the best energies we've had so far this year. And then so this week, we kicked off the week in a really big way. On May 13th, on Monday, we had our annual meetup of the sun and the planet Uranus. So just as I said, Uranus relates to our individuation path, our liberation to an extent, sense of freedom, but also as a humanity, it relates a lot to coming together as a whole, but also kind of rebelling against outdated structures and forces that might be trying to keep us unliberated to an extent. So when the sun and Uranus meet up, which happens only once a year, this time it was in the sign of Taurus because that's where Uranus is, that's where the sun was. Sun still is for another couple of days. It's a very, it's a more grounded energy. So that's where I'm kind of pulling these grounded pieces in because we still have a lot of energy in the sign of Taurus, particularly in the last degrees. So think about what happened last weekend. Uranus brings surprises. It has like a revolutionary vibe to it, but also things that can kind of happen that are out of the blue. Think about our surprise auroras that happened last weekend. And I don't think it was any coincidence. There's always some kind of divine synchronicity at work, and that's the language that Uranus speaks anyway, to, I mean, global auroras. Like I got pictures from people as far south as South Carolina, but I know it went farther south than that. I'm in New Jersey, like you all know. So that it's just surprise solar flare, solar storm, surprise Uranus relates to electricity, lightning, that kind of thing. So electricity like in a big way. So just having that happen right before or as Uranus and the sun were coming together was a really curious thing. I just think that that was really cool. So we kind of kicked off the week with all of that, and just people kind of, my whole thing, like one of my taglines is looking up in awe and wonder always. So everyone, this like the past couple of months with the solar eclipse and now with the auroras, just like having this sense of awe about our place in this, the vastness of the universe, and just this inner knowing that there's something bigger, and just being able to see it on display in such a beautiful way, and having people come together again for something like that, like all the pictures from worldwide, and just, it really touching people in a deep way, kind of like the solar eclipse did. So it's a really cool thing that's happening around that. That was a surprise. We knew the eclipse was coming for a very long time, but this whole solar flare, solar storm thing, maybe we did, maybe we didn't. I'm not really sure, but it really brought out a cool thing. So we kicked off the week with that. But there was also last weekend kind of just some where the behavior things started brewing a little bit, like around, I don't know if it was the Mother's Day weekend, Mother's Day thing, the maternal energy, the focus, like all of that that brought stuff up. But there was just a lot of ickiness, I guess you could say, in people's behaviors that I've noticed, and I'm not the only one. We talked about this on Tuesday's live. I can put a link for the replay of that as well if you want to see kind of what we were discussing and the cards and messages that came up in relation to that discussion, and how we were all kind of seeing that anyway. People that joined us on the live are also experiencing it. So that's where I'm saying, like, there's all these planets, as they're moving through the sign of Taurus, are having some kind of contact challenge from the planet Pluto, which can bring that shadow, that ick, that ugliness up to the surface, but it's coming up for attention, for purification. So that's why I'm saying it's all in how we really work with it personally and then collectively that is going to make the difference. So then we kicked off the week, that was the 13th, Sun and Uranus coming together. And then Mercury shifted into the sign of Taurus on the 15th. So all this week, we've had this building square between the planets Mercury and Pluto. Pluto is at 2 degrees. You'll see in the chart when I share the chart for the full moon. Pluto's at 2 degrees of Aquarius still. And then Mercury shifted into Taurus, so it went to 0 degrees, and it's been kind of moving through. Mercury moves very quickly, so this didn't last very long. But when we have a 90-degree angle between two planets, it's a square. We talk about squares a lot in my podcast and in these astro weather checks, how they bring up something challenging for review, for some kind of action to deal with whatever it is that's coming up. So Mercury is our perspective, communication. There's just been a lot of that, like just mean words and mean truths, like things that from the past that have just kind of come back up to the surface all week for me personally as well. So it's, it's just a way to shift our perspective around it. If there's a boundary that's gotten challenged, to remember why the boundary's there in the first place. So just all of that kind of coming up throughout this week as well, leading into the full moon on Thursday. So just know that that's there, and that's kind of why a lot of things are happening. We're now very clear of the Mercury retrograde. The post shadow period is now over. And all that means is Mercury moved forward over the same degrees that it was retrograde. So that whole Mercury retrograde experience that happened with the eclipse and everything, Mercury spending roughly 2 months in the sign of Aries, which is pretty common when there's a Mercury retrograde for Mercury to stay in one sign for an extended period of time. Mercury has now moved on. So the energy is much different in the sign of Taurus. Mercury in Taurus is just more grounded. Aries is very fast and impulsive and moves really quickly. So we kind of had that whole experience of the retrograde being in that sign, and now we're moving forward in a practical way, changing our perspective, having these shifts kind of come into fruition, into manifestation, and now we can move on and move forward in a steadfast, practical way to whatever our perspective shift or whatever new information came in during the retrograde. So we have that energy kind of also underlying this week. And then yesterday was a really big day cosmically and astrologically. We had the planets Venus and Uranus come together. So Uranus is all the Uranian energy is getting infused into like everything. And we kind of started with it when Uranus and Jupiter came together on the 20th of April. And I discussed that in a previous Astro Weather Check. So that only happens roughly every 14 years. It happened in the sign of Taurus again this time around. So very interesting energy. So Uranus meeting up with a lot of the planets, also a lot of the planets meeting up with the sun. So that's where the consciousness comes in, but that's also where the liberation comes in. The sun with the consciousness and Uranus with the liberation. So Venus, Uranus yesterday. So surprises in my relationships, surprises in our connections to everything we love and value, giving us an opportunity to kind of shift around those things if things are no longer serving us in that area of our lives. Things kind of can sometimes happen surprisingly that force us to act in a different way, maybe that we haven't in the past, which is where I'm getting into the breaking of the pattern thing. So that energy is also there. Also with Mercury and Pluto kind of having this dialogue too. So we get to dig really deep into whatever's coming up and make the choice to, like I said, move forward in a different way. And then we also had the sun and the planet Jupiter come together yesterday as well. So I'll talk about that. I'm going to go into Jupiter in more depth momentarily. So that also only happens once a year. We had Mars and the North Node come together yesterday as well, around 13 degrees of the sign of Aries. And we'll look at that in the chart when we look at the full moon chart. So this is a really important part. And this is what I was getting at as far as taking action steps toward our own path forward in a different way. Mars gives us our oomph, our drive, our will, action-oriented planet, very action-oriented planet. But it also can have a tendency toward lower vibration things like bullying or fighting, arguments, that kind of stuff. So with Mars, the ruler, so Mars rules the sign of Aries. It's one of the signs that Mars rules. The North Node's been in Aries since last July. We've had this dynamic for a long time now of releasing things that no longer serve us in our relationships. So things that disturb our peace, things from the past, from our past that we're letting fall away in order to move forward in a more independent way. Libra, relationships, peace, harmony, that kind of thing, balance. Aries on the other side, independence, courage, bravery, forging a new path forward, instinct. So we've had this dynamic now for a while between the signs of Libra and Aries, the South Node being in Libra, the North Node being in the sign of Aries. North Node's the path forward, South Node is the release. So that's been since last July. We've covered this. I just want to bring it up again because it's important with Mars and the North Node coming together, because there's some kind of magic I always see happen, whether it's in our own natal charts or just, as things move through the sky with transits. When the ruler of the North Node and the North Node come together, there's something very curious. So, like I said, Mars rules the sign of Aries. Mars has been in Aries now for a little while, since the end of April. And the North Node's in Aries, and the two came together, which doesn't always happen. This won't happen. Mars and the North Node coming together in the sign of Aries, that's a pretty rare transit. So it's another opportunity for us to really, like I said, take action steps toward the path forward, but in our own healing journey, in our own, it's a very individual, but also a very collective thing that's going on here with everything that we've had within Aries that we've covered, like everything that happened with the solar eclipse, everything that's been going on and going through that sign. Like we had a huge energetic focus there for most of April. And Chiron's been involved. Our healing journey has been involved in a really big way. So that energy, and then this kind of thing with Mars and the North Node culminating and coming together when we're in the integration phase of everything, I feel is a really wonderful opportunity to choose the action steps toward our own path forward, independence in a way, in relationship in particular, severing things that no longer serve us. Mars has that severing energy. It's like our shield and our sword. Like you can look at the symbol of the planet and get a lot of information about what the planet's energy is all about. That divine masculine energy kind of coming into play as well. Like that gives us our drive. And I've talked about this a lot, especially around the eclipse with the divine feminine and masculine coming together. I talked a lot about that in the Taurus New Moon Astro-Weather Check, about the divine union and the healing that comes into play to bring the divine masculine and feminine into a more balanced place. So we have that energy infused into all of this week too. So like everything I said from the beginning is kind of now like I'm giving you the explanations as to why I said everything that I already did. So we have that energy kind of there as well this week to just choose differently. Choose us, choose yourself. And that severing or whatever comes out of the situation, whatever's happening in your life on a personal level related to all of this, it's a really good opportunity to just like take the step back and make a different choice. So there's that energy as well. And then, like I said, the building square between Mercury and Pluto that came exact yesterday as well. So that's been building all week. All of this has kind of been building all week, and everything kind of came to the exact degrees yesterday. And now we're kind of moving on the other side of it. It's like I said, it's been a really big week, and now we're moving into the full moon energy. So things are still like on an emotional level bubbling to the surface. I think back to, what was it? The moon was new in the sign of Sagittarius on December 12th last year. So not only reflecting back on the short-term lunar cycle, which is roughly 28 and a half days. So when the moon was new back on May 7th, but also on the long term, the way I prefer to work with lunar cycles in the 6 months time frame, what was going on back then in December when the moon was new in Sagittarius, and what has culminated in your life since then. And with Sagittarius energy, it's just, I always call it the free spirit of the zodiac. It's very usually optimistic, benevolent, expansive. We really get to expand our consciousness and work with our own magic in the sign of Sagittarius. There are shadowy aspects, which I'll get to when we talk more about the full moon, but it should feel, whatever's culminated and whatever work that you have done to contribute to that culmination on a personal level, it should feel good. It should be an expansion of you in some way. So we have that, all of that kind of coming into the full moon week. So let's get to that next. We have this in 2 days on the 20th, the sun will shift into Gemini. So out of Taurus into the sign of Gemini. And then we have the full moon on Thursday, the 23rd. So let's look at that chart and we'll get more into the nitty-gritty of everything. So for here in Atlantic City, this is our chart for Thursday morning's full moon. It'll be full at 9:52 a.m. on Thursday, the 23rd. For some reason, my software is like a minute off usually. So it's 9:52 based on most resources out there. For SolarFire or whatever, it's 9:53. So 9:52, 9:53 a.m. on Thursday. The moon will be full in Sagittarius at 2 degrees. So you see over here, we have the sun at 2 degrees Gemini, freshly in the sign of Gemini, full moon on the other side. So that's always the opposition with the full moon. Moon opposite sun coming to its fullest brilliance for a few minutes, couple minutes usually. So this full moon is another kind of magical one. There's nothing that's really hitting it from an angle that's a challenge. I mean, there's always a challenge in and of itself and an opposition, but that's always an opportunity for balance of the energies. But as far as other planets that are involved, there's nothing that's screaming at me like this is going to be a really intense, unusually more intense full moon or anything like that. Unlike the last one in Scorpio, which was off the charts intense. So this time around, it's much more uplifting energy. But like I said, it's up to us and what we do and what we have been doing since early March with everything that's come up with the eclipse season and all of the things that I've already mentioned. The cool thing we have here, at least here on the East Coast, this will be different for other places in the world, but we have this mystic rectangle aspect here in the chart for the full moon here in Atlantic City, here on the East Coast. So this is part of why I'm getting at like the inspired manifestation or whatever tagline I'll eventually settle on. But this is a really great energy to co-create with the universe. The mystic rectangle is just an inherent, beautiful connection to spirituality, to source, to the magic of our soul and beyond the physical. So we are kind of moving in a big way beyond the physical because our clusters that we've had over here on this one side of the zodiac are going to start to break up. As we move on in this year, things are going to be moving out of the sign of Taurus. So Taurus is the sensual experience, but it's also the physical world. It relates very much to our values, our self-worth, but also like the things that we can see and experience with our actual senses, like the common ones, the common five. But this gives us a chance to move beyond the physical, beyond the five, and get into our sensory experience of things that we just energetically feel. So there's a really cool vibe in that with the full moon, and then it'll continue shifting as things move into Gemini. So when we're talking about Gemini energy, as we have all these things kind of shifting the week of the full moon and after, and I'll get to that, it's ideas, it's information, it's being just social, it's communication, it's curiosity. It's that fluttery, buzzy energy. Like think of a hummingbird, just kind of goes from, one thing to the next, and it's just feeding on things that are brand new, that are a new resource, a new experience. So that's Gemini. But on the flip side, Gemini is the twins. So we always have the other side of that. So the important part and the thing I kind of want to drive home in this discussion and with this full moon and as things start shifting into Gemini is to just be very aware of the flip side. And with this full moon in particular, the dynamic between Gemini and Sagittarius. So Gemini is the new, the fresh, the new perspective, the new thought, the new idea, the new thought form, the new information ruled by Mercury. On the other side is the maturation of that. So how a new school of thought becomes a philosophy. Think of like a teacher of young people to a teacher of mature people, like a kindergarten teacher to a college professor. That's a rudimentary analogy, but just to kind of give you an idea to kind of put to what I'm talking about. The thing that we need to be wary of with this dynamic, and we'll get to it when I talk about Jupiter, is when it goes too far. When we get to the place where things become self-righteous, when we get to a space of being dogmatic, when we get to a space of maybe relying too much on information that was new, but it wasn't necessarily truth, and having that become a belief that's rooted in something that's not of a higher vibration. When we get to the point where we're too set in our ways and set in our thoughts to not be open to another person's perspective or another perspective in general. This is where we get into trouble. This is where wars have been started centuries upon centuries in the past, of millennia upon millennia. Think of religious wars, think of where we are right now. This is where we get to the flip side and to the darker side of this energy. So, like I've said already, the choice is to stay in the higher vibration, stay curious. We all have a really good opportunity right now where this full moon kind of kicks it off, and then we'll get to the next part of it. But we have a good opportunity to really sharpen our tools around discernment of information. The full moon happens on Thursday, 9:52 a.m. And then one by one, we'll have some shifts into the sign of Gemini. Venus shifts in. There's a very magical thing happening with Venus and the sun and Gemini, which we'll get to in the next Astro-Weather Check. But on the 25th of next week, Jupiter shifts into the sign of Gemini. Jupiter's been in the sign of Taurus, so a very grounded energy, but also like think of all the things around our resources and finances that have been inflated since Jupiter's been in Taurus, which has been since May 23rd of last year. Let me check that date. Yep. Jupiter spends roughly 1 year in every sign. So we've had a year of Jupiter in Taurus. It's a really good time, again, like I said, for reflection, not only from the new moon, from the 7th, the last 2 months, but also the last year. Where in your life have you experienced some form of expansion, some form of abundance that came in a new way, in a grounded way, like a physical way, but also like look at everything and like just the prices of everything are just off the charts, ridiculous. Everything, the housing market, groceries, like inflation in general, like this is where it gets to be too much. So I want to talk about, maybe we'll do the card for Jupiter next, and we'll talk about the meaning of the planet Jupiter. And then we'll talk about some things to just be aware of with this shift. There are very positive, incredibly awesome things, but there are also some things that I feel like are really important to be wary of, have caution around, because with Gemini, there's always, the other face, the other side. It's very pronounced between the light and the shadow in the sign of Gemini. So let's talk about Jupiter. Let's go to this camera for right now, and then we'll go back to the chart. So I'm using my Starcodes Astro deck for this because they're just very short descriptions. So for the Jupiter card from this deck, it's abundance. It's the horn of plenty, the cornucopia kind of on this card, which is cool. Jupiter's the largest planet. Jupiter's magnetic gravitational pull draws everything towards it. So we have that energy working with this. That's also, there's a magnetism to Gemini energy also. So let's just keep all of that in mind as we review the meaning of the planet Jupiter. So this book is really good for just kind of summarized descriptions of the meanings of everything. Jupiter symbolizes how we expand our world through education, law, philosophy, travel, abundance, and an expansive spirit. Jupiter, the traditional ruler of Sagittarius and Pisces, is a huge gas giant, 2.5 times the volume of all the other planets put together. It takes 12 years to circle the zodiac, spending roughly 1 year in each sign. Named for the ruler of all the gods and surrounded by 79 known moons, Jupiter never does anything in small proportions. Action. Think bigger. This scenario requires you to be expansive and forgiving. Deal with it in a spacious, curious, fair, and philosophical way. Think globally. Bring in contributions from all around the world. Consider traveling physically or traveling with your senses by listening to music from a less familiar culture or tasting their food. Talk to people who grew up in a circumstance foreign to you and get their viewpoint. Diversify your perspective and that of your team to discover the missing pieces needed to make up a larger whole. Engage in abundant optimism. Get the word out through generosity. Give abundantly and goodwill comes back to you. Invest in education, publication, and broadcasting. Just be careful that your generosity is actually helping the recipient, not enabling or burdening them. Ask what would really help. Jupiter's energy needs a big room and an audience, but it can overshadow important people in more intimate circumstances. Watch that your expansive capacity does not cramp the experimentation of beginners or crowd beloved introverts. Notice where you might overwhelm the people you love and give them room for their more subtle style. If you are the one being so overwhelmed, appreciate your own value, expand in ways that work for you, and let the person with the Jupiter energy do their thing. Challenge. Jupiter can bring too much of a good thing or leave people feeling overwhelmed. Watch out for magical thinking and a Pollyanna avoidance of problems. Gift. Give and you shall receive. Jupiter calls you to expand your worldview, so reach out and feel at one with the whole universe. So, with this shift that's happening, remember everything that I said about the meaning of Gemini. Remember that this is a big change in the energy. Remember that too much of a good thing is still too much. Think of that Dave Matthews song, Too Much. That could be one to kind of play on the 25th when Jupiter changes signs as a good reminder that it's still, there's a need for balance, especially like with the North Node involved with the planet Mars. Like it's the same thing, like getting into that North Node space, like, yes, that's the place where we grow, but it also can be like, if we're too far and we stay too much in that energy, it can just be too much, just too much. And it's a good reminder around the things that we're already seeing, because, and let's go back to the chart. As soon as Jupiter and Venus, actually, they're together at the time of the full moon, and then one by one they'll shift into Gemini. As they shift in, they're going to have some kind of contact and communication with the planet Pluto. 2 degrees of Gemini is a harmonious flow of energy to 2 degrees of Aquarius. They're both air signs. So as things shift into Gemini, they're going to have contact with Pluto in a more harmonious way than it would be with a square, as we're seeing as things have shifted into the sign of Taurus. See, that's the early degrees of Taurus. Up here is a square to Pluto, a square to Aquarius. They're both fixed signs, so the fixed signs square each other. The elements, which is called a trine, they trine each other. That's these blue lines that we're seeing, this harmonious flow that goes back to a part of this mystic rectangle. So the sun at the time of the full moon, harmonious flow of energy with Pluto. So that's what I was getting at in the beginning when I said that there's a depth to things. There's a depth to things that might be coming to the surface with the full moon. There's a purification. There's an opportunity for purification, for harnessing the transformative power that Pluto gives all of us. And then Venus is going to shift in. So we had Venus squaring Pluto when Venus shifted into Taurus in late April. And that brought up a lot around relationships. That was around the energy that we experienced during the Scorpio full moon. Now we have our harmonious flow roughly a month later. How are we handling it? How are we dealing with whatever came up? How are we moving forward in an expansion way that's going to help our own personal growth, but also contribute to the rise and elevation of consciousness to an extent? This Gemini Sagittarius axis is also very much about consciousness and letting new things come in and seeing the other sides and examining things from all different perspectives. And then letting that contribute to our own personal philosophical growth. Venus shifts in, then Jupiter shifts in, and then Jupiter has a contact with Pluto, a trine with Pluto, a harmonious flow of energy. So on the flip side, think about everything that we've been seeing with AI since Pluto started dancing between Aquarius and Capricorn, which started last year in March, roughly for a few months, dipped back in. This year, January 20th, Pluto went back into Aquarius. I've talked about this in previous Astro-Weather checks. And it's had a longer stay this time. And we're seeing all of this AI stuff have a stronger presence in our lives. I've seen, so it goes as far as like artwork, like all the like the Copilot and the Dollies and all these image generation AI softwares that are out there now. My astrology teacher had a podcast recently where he made songs. Like it sounded like a whole band, but it was just an AI music generator. So that was curious. But there's also falsification of information that can come with all of this. So this is where we're getting to the more shadowy side of Jupiter being in Gemini, which is going to be for the next year. So think about everything we have as a collective happening over the next year. We have an election coming up in the United States. Like there's a lot of, you have to really, like I said, sharpen your tools around discernment right now, around what's truth and what's not, what's real and what's fake, what's a deep fake, what's an AI generated, whatever, voice, image, video, song, speech. Like this can go far. This can be too much. So beware of attempts to deceive. Beware of untruths looking like reality. Information, like the information war, or like, I don't know, caution around speech or how you receive information. Like all this kind of comes to my mind as we're going through this transit together collectively. Just really, really think about things. Think about how the truth vibrates at a different level than untruth does. Think about how information, when you receive it, feels in your body. We've all had really good training around all of that the last 4 years. So these are good times to kind of reflect back on how you felt when something was said to you that you knew intuitively that it wasn't true. Really good time to hone those skills in a really deep and big way. But on the more, energetically positive side, at some part of our lives will get a boost with this energy with the Jupiter shift. Some part of a bigger theme around whatever our Gemini parts are. So if you have placements in Gemini, if you know your chart, if you know what house that is in your chart, bonus points, because then you'll know what shifts and what themes and what things you can kind of expect to have some kind of touch of, the Midas touch, some kind of expansion, some kind of abundance coming into play there. But remember the caution, remember the warnings, remember the things that I've said on the other side of it, because we have the light and the dark highlighted in a big way with Gemini energy. Go back to the song Too Much by Dave Matthews and you'll get a kind of good idea of, like too much of anything, even if it's good, is still too much. Like if we eat too much, we get obese, that causes disease. If we consume too much, we run out of resources. So there's just that energy that's kind of there too. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned all of that. And then I kind of think that might be enough. I've thrown a lot at all of you for that. But yeah, just lots and lots and lots for reflection and lots and lots and lots to just sort of really contemplate on in moving forward into the rest of this year. Like the second part of the year is going to have a very different energy than the first part of this year has. So yeah, moving into all of that, just think about everything that I've said, all the shifts that we've had, the huge shifts, the huge breakthroughs, everything that changed, whatever happened the last couple months around the eclipse, like all this is sort of building and working on everything together. And we're at this point now, especially with the full moon, to really, this is the last time we're going to have a Sagittarius full moon ruled by Jupiter, with Jupiter in Taurus, because it's at the very late degrees at the time of the full moon for a while. So 12 years roughly. So it's just a lot to really just take stock of. Like, how has your life changed in the last year? Like, I can honestly say my life is very different right now than it was a year ago. And I have some exciting changes coming up very soon that I'm going to be excited to announce in a future episode. So, yeah. Um, it's a lot. I threw a lot out today, but there's a lot happening. So it wasn't just focusing on the full moon. I wanted to make sure I touched on everything. And I pulled more into the last Astro Weather Check as well. I did that one more earlier than I usually do. So I'll put a link, like I said, to that. I'll put a link to the episode I did around the Sagittarius New Moon in early December. So you can reflect back to 6 months ago, which I think is a more important time frame to really focus on, and see how your life has changed in the last 6 months and the inner work that you've done to bring about positive changes if you've chosen to do that. That's where Jupiter gets tricky. With Jupiter, yes, it is, a lot of astrologers call it the Santa Claus of the zodiac. And yes, I agree with that. However, Jupiter works in funny ways because it's up to us to make the choice to receive the abundance. When someone gives you a compliment, to say thank you rather than coming up with a excuse or something where you're negating what they said or putting yourself down, or like, that's a beautiful dress. Oh, this old thing? No, that's a beautiful dress. Thank you. I really appreciate you saying that. Like, it's a very fine line between receiving it and not being open to the expansion energy, or shutting it down and staying in the shadowy side where you're just self-righteous and overpowering other people and consuming all of that magnetism and vibration and gravitational pull for yourself. That's where we get into trouble a little bit with the dynamic between Gemini and Sagittarius, but also between Mercury and Jupiter. So Jupiter's moving into a Mercury ruled sign rather than a Venus ruled sign. So the themes are going to be different. It's going to be interesting. But I love mercurial energy. So that's just I'm curious to see what's going to happen, and I'm just open to receive and being in the gratitude rather than having a retort of something else. Like, I'm just personally, I'm just curious as well, and you'll all be going on this journey with me as I'll be sharing it in podcast episodes and Astro Weather Checks. So I was going to record episode 1 of season 4 of Becoming Chiron last week. I actually had it on my calendar for Monday, but I respond very weirdly to the solar energy. And with everything that happened over the weekend, not just the solar storms that kind of put me in this weird insomnia phase of the week, but also things that happened personally around Mother's Day, like I just didn't have the energy for it. So I honored that rather than pushing through it. Like, I felt kind of teetering on not feeling well, and just I was very tired. So I just rolled with it and gave myself the space to rest a little bit more than usual during this week. So I'm hoping, and my intention is to record this week. And I already have the episode outlined. I already know what we're going to talk about. The episode's going to be focused on the emotion of fear. And I'm really excited to dive into that. And I'm pretty sure I'm ready to share my personal solar eclipse experience story, which definitely ties into fear. So I'm going to do that episode around fear, but I'm also going to share that experience with you all as promised. I'm ready. I'm ready to. I think it's important to share it. So that will be recorded and posted at some point this week. So episode 1 of season 4, I'm excited. And just to dive back into the intro episode, like I said, we're going to be diving deeply into just transmuting things and the plutonic process, as I called it, and all of that. So I'll also put a link to the intro episode I did roughly a month ago at this point, so you can all get a reminder of what season 4 is going to be all about. And yes, it's still definitely going to be episode 1 is going to be all about fear. So let's pull our Sacred Rebels card for today, and then we will close out. And as I'm shuffling, just a reminder to everybody, you can find the video versions of these Astro Weather checks and my podcast episodes moving forward on our Sea Goddess YouTube and also on Spotify. And the audio versions will be on any podcast platform that you love. It's posted pretty much on all popular ones like Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, that kind of thing. So if you were wanting to see the chart that I shared or wanting to see the images on the Oracle cards that I'm sharing, hop over to the video episode on Spotify or on our Sea Goddess YouTube, and you'll find these episodes in the Becoming Chiron feed. I do these as bonus episodes of my Becoming Chiron podcast, and then they're just separate videos in the same playlists, pretty much. And they have their own playlist also on our YouTube. So if you want to see the things, if you want to see me, oh, I love this card. So check out the video. And then also just ways to support, like, share, follow, always. There's a paid subscription option available for financial support for me for keeping this creative project going for $8.99 a month. And you can find that on the Spotify version, but there's also a link to it. It's through Spotify, but there's a link to it in every episode description anyway. So our Sacred Rebels card for today, to kind of give a mic drop moment to the Uranian energy that we're all in also, with all the planets meeting up with Uranus too. Heaven Sent, card number 33. Now that is a visual for expansion of consciousness, is it not? I love this card so much. It's so beautiful. And 33 is one of those beautiful angel numbers. So numerologically, it's an angel number, so you can look that up on whatever your favorite source is for angel numbers and meetings for 33, but also we add them together, which breaks down to a 6. 6 is all about foundation. So we have an opportunity to build a different foundation in all of this. Like I said, the path forward can be built from a new place, and the energy moving forward can come from a new place where we're breaking a pattern or putting ourselves first in a new way, or focusing more on our independence and our own journey and our healing moving forward. So this is a beautiful energy message to kind of tap into that, tap into our intuition, tap into our consciousness, and kind of see where we want to go from here. It's pretty cool. So I'll read these. All of these cards have a healing process. So I'll read, let's see how long the description is. Just not to go too much longer. And then we'll see if I can include the entire thing or if we'll just do the healing process for this card. Yeah, let's do the whole thing. The healing process is actually really brief, so all the nuts and bolts are in the card description. Okay, so the message for the Heaven Sent card. Just as we receive gifts in the physical world through the thoughtfulness of others, to acknowledge how much we mean to them, so too we receive gifts on other levels, including the spiritual level. A spiritual gift is something that happens through grace. We can ask for help, and it may be given in response to that request. All requests for help are answered. A spiritual gift can also be given without us asking for anything at all, at least not consciously. Sometimes it is our hearts that cry out for help. While we are busy getting on with our to-do lists, we don't often stop to think about what our hearts might need. If we do, and an immediate solution is not obvious, we just get on with life, either letting the issue be or taking a more painful option of dwelling on it without seeing how it might be resolved. However, there is a loving benevolence in life that knows exactly what we need and how it can best come to us. even when we are not quite so clear. This force actively seeks to assist us in walking our life path. That loving sweetness is being offered to you now, or soon will be, in the form of a spiritual gift. Your spiritual gift may be symbolic. It may be something that seems ordinary, but holds a lot of meaning to you. It might be an object that catches your eye and mesmerizes you. You might think you are appreciating how lovely it looks, but it is the underlying energy that captures you. Something in the appearance, color, or shape speaks to you and is, perhaps, answering an unspoken prayer. It is not the object that is the gift. That is just the wrapping. The actual gift is subtle, yet effective empowerment. It is like a spiritual booster shot that helps you move forward in life with additional zing, extra strength, and greater peace. You will be empowered to accomplish tasks that you may have nearly, but not quite, been able to manage on your own through the bestowal of a spiritual gift. The spiritual gift may or may not be recognizable to you. It may be very obvious, an offer, a windfall, a trip, a friendship, a new lover, or a remarkable healing in a current relationship. It might be far more subtle and even more powerful, such as a jolt of energy that allows you to perceive things differently all of a sudden, and perhaps solve a problem that has been plaguing you. It will be bestowed as and when it is needed, in the form that will best serve the love in you. This oracle also brings you the message, let yourself be helped. Assistance is coming your way, so act on it and say yes. I'm going to ignore that part because it talks about another card in combination with this one. This oracle also comes with the message that you are to trust in the things that you feel and say to others without knowing why. It moves them. You might not understand, but through trust, you are allowing yourself not to overthink and censor yourself. As such, you are able to become a vessel through which the spiritual gift can be passed on to others. Don't block yourself. Let life happen through you. Only benefit can come from this. If you have drawn any other card in addition to this one, it acts as a wild card and an amplifier. So I'll skip over that because we haven't drawn any other cards. So, in summary, it is simple to receive the gift that is headed your way. The healing process below will activate that for you. And here's the healing process. Say, through unconditional love, I now accept the spiritual gifts that are bestowed upon me. With complete trust and gratitude, so be it. I love that. I think that is a very good summary of everything I've discussed. As usual, the oracle cards usually give me the mic drop that I need. So I'm going to wrap it there for today. I also meant to mention that I'm pretty sure I'm going to post a lunar blend for sale for Thursday's full moon. And it will most likely be just the two oils. So the oil for Sagittarius is black pepper, and that's where the moon will be during the full moon. And the oil for Gemini is basil, which is where the sun will be. And, other planets as we move past the full moon. So I'm pretty sure it'll just be a blend of those two. That makes it relatively inexpensive. And you can find that on our website, in our shop, in the aromatherapy shop. And I'll make, excuse me, I'll put a link to it also in the episode description. And my lunar blends, if you're not familiar, are a form of my astrological aromatherapy practice that were sort of birthed through some full moon circles that I used to go to back in 2019. And I find that blending the two, what's called signature oils for the sun sign and the moon sign during the energy of full moon, kind of helps with that sense of balancing out the two and the tensions that are just always present with full moons in general. So, astrological aromatherapy and energy medicine can help us in very subtle, beautiful ways. And they're what's called a stock blend. So, it's just the oils. And typically, the best way to use those are just in your diffuser. So around the time of the full moon, just drop 5 to 10 drops in your diffuser, depending on your room size, and it'll just make a beautiful energetic blend that can help with your senses, just with the energy on a subtle vibrational level, with the full moon vibes. So I'm sure I can pretty easily have that tied up and put together in time, and that'll be for sale pretty much up until Thursday, the day of the full moon. So we'll have that as well as a part to help with the energies. And yeah, that's it. I'll wrap it up for here. Remember, as I always say and close out with every episode, kind of more tied to my Becoming Chiron podcast, but with this energy specifically, also with the Uranian vibes, remember to be a maverick. And ta ta for now. Till next time. Bye.